Good morning to everyone, and a cheery good morning to our panel and moderator. Welcome to day 2 of the Intelligence and National Security Summit. We hope you enjoyed yesterday's program and networking reception. And for everyone tuning in remotely, welcome, or welcome back if you were with us yesterday as well. So, year after year, our senior-most leaders in the community see the summit as a forum to share strategic insights with their most critical partners, all of you. And this year, I am happy to say, is no exception. I'd say we have a true all-star lineup with us today. So thank you all for being here. As a reminder to the audience, we value your questions, in particular early submission, and I'll say this for Olivia, early submission of concise questions using the email questions@intelsummit.org. Later today, you will receive an event survey at your registration email address. Please be candid in your assessment. We really do use your feedback. We use it to make this event better for you each year. I'd also like to thank our sponsors and encourage all of you to take advantage of the opportunities today to interact with the exhibitors. The kiosks, I think, have really been terrific. There's been a lot of good interaction, so I encourage you to continue that interaction, especially if you didn't have the opportunity yesterday. A few logistical points. At the conclusion of this plenary, we have a 30-minute networking break, followed by breakout sessions focused on China and commercial space. Lunch will be available starting at 11:45, and that is courtesy of Hawkeye 360. Again, thank you to all of our sponsors. And then we'll hold 2 more breakout sessions focused on advanced technologies and software supply chain security. And those will be followed by a fireside chat with our very first National Cyber Director, Chris Inglis. And Chris is no stranger to this group, of course. Finally, I want to remind everyone that masks are required by Prince George's County and by the Conference Center unless you are eating or drinking or up here on stage. Thank you for taking this small step to keep all of us healthy. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce Joe Landino, Vice President, Technology, Innovation, and Integration at Peraton, who will introduce our moderator. And like several of our attendees, Joe is joining us by video this morning. Joe, over to you.
Good morning and welcome. I want to thank AFCEA and INSA for organizing forums such as this symposium, which allow us to discuss our common challenges, gain insights from our peers, and provide an opportunity to look ahead to the future. Peraton has been a proud supporter of INSA and AFCEA for many years and is honored to be sponsoring today's plenary session on strategic intelligence. Peraton and its legacy companies form a rich history of over a half-century of support to the intelligence community. Over this enormous period, Peraton has vigorously pursued the IC's ever-changing threat environment to successfully offer differentiated solutions across the full mission spectrum. Do the can't be done isn't a slogan, it's our organizational DNA and directs everything we do. It is my pleasure to introduce our moderator for this morning's session, Olivia Gazis. Olivia covers intelligence and national security issues for CBS News, where she contributes reporting across all the network's platforms, from the CBS Evening News to its digital streaming channel, CBSN. She also produces Intelligence Matters, a podcast and radio program hosted by former CIA Acting Director Michael Morrell. Olivia was previously an investigative fellow with Hearst Newspapers, where her reporting team earned a Sigma Delta Chi Award for excellence in journalism. She is a Fulbright scholar and speaks Polish, French, and Italian. Ladies and gentlemen, your moderator, Olivia Gazis.
Thank you so much. Thank you and good morning. And yes, welcome to day 2. I am delighted to be here and to be joined by this remarkable panel of guests. Reciting their biographies would easily consume the entire session, so I'm just going to alphabetically tell you who they are and then we'll dive right in. With us today, we have Mr. Paul Abate, Deputy Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Lieutenant General Scott Berrier, Director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, Major General Charles Cleveland, Associate Director for Operations at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, Mr. David Cohen, Deputy Director of the Central Intelligence Agency, General Paul Nakasone, Commander of the United States Cyber Command and Director of the National Security Agency and Central Security Service, and Dr. Christopher Scalise, not last but not least, Director of the National Reconnaissance Office. Obviously, a lot of firepower for one stage, and Tish, you might consider rebranding this the Other Worldwide Threats hearing because we've got so much territory to cover. I'd like to ask all of our panelists to start by briefly addressing one landscape question, which is there's been this remarkable expansion to what we understand national security to constitute. The world and your agencies are experiencing unprecedented technological, demographic, climate, global health challenges, in addition to known threats from China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and non-state actors. The DNI scooped us all here yesterday and said that the entire community right now is prioritizing China. So I'd like to ask you, what after China at each of your respective agencies are you prioritizing? And tell us, again, just briefly, how you're making that calculus. Let's just go down the line, starting with Mr. Abate.
Thank you. So good morning, everyone. For us in the FBI, counterterrorism is our #1 priority. It has been for a long time and continues to be. So we're focused on that, and that's all about keeping people safe, protecting lives, keeping people safe from physical harm. So that's always been #1 with us. It's going to continue to be that way, particularly with everything that we're seeing going on around the world today. And then also put cyber way up there. Cyber is a component of every threat that we face, but especially in recent times, we've seen the proliferation of ransomware attacks, that which threatens our critical infrastructure, which goes to threatening life, health, and safety. So I would put those two at the top for us, counterterrorism and cyber threats.
Thank you. General Berry.
Good morning, great to be here. Thinking about it slightly differently, as you know, DIA is an all-source analysis agency that also does collection, and so as we prioritize China, we're attempting to make that pivot right now. We have several issues that we're dealing with. The first one really is people. The second one is technology. The third one is access, and the fourth is partnerships. So on people, we want to make sure that we have a diverse workforce, because if everybody looks like me, we're not going to get very far down the road on the diversity of thinking and how we view future threats. With technology, I really see that as this AI, ML infusion into a thing called Mars, as well as collateral telemetry data, as well as ubiquitous technical surveillance, and those things that we're going to have to deal with in the future to be able to get after the threat. Access to get to hard places. As you all know, we have attachés accredited all over the world. That gives us unique insights and access, and we're always looking to increase our access. And then with regard to partnerships, I'm talking more than just a Five Eyes partnership with a 5-seal analytical product. I'm talking about deep penetrating partnerships where we can actually strategically compete. We have pivoted towards China with a new director for global integration, which we think will give us some opportunities in the future. Right now, it is China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, and violent extremist organizations. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you very much. Much like General Berrier and DIA, we share many of the same efforts that he mentioned, but specific to NGA. And at a very practical level, the first thing we're really trying to do is we're trying to reinvest a bit of our human capital so that our human capital can refocus from the terrorism effort that we've had really onto China. And of course, there's a financial capital aspect that goes into that. And so in many ways, we're looking for areas that we can bring together resources and then be able to apply them against this particular problem set. The second aspect of it is we're trying to increase our cultural literacy. And what I mean by that is not necessarily literacy about China, but obviously everybody in our agency has been focused on terrorism, and everybody's had some role in it at some point. So everybody is very familiar with the types of efforts we have been doing. On top of that, of course, 9/11 provided a dramatic sense of urgency. That sense of urgency was maintained and sustained because we had Americans in the field and there was a risk to Americans. And so it was easy to sustain that type of urgency. And what we really want to do with our workforce is look for ways that we can recreate that urgency for China and the need that we can't wait for tomorrow. We have to be focused on it today, as well as in the vein of the rising tide raising all boats, essentially bring up the level of expertise within our agency across the agency so that China is as familiar as the things we've been doing for the last 20 years. The final things that we're really doing are focused on technology. They're not unique or specific to China, but China is our pacing item. And so as we look at competing with China, within the GeoLink community, we're very much competing with China across a number of areas. And so as we look at our advances, be it in collection, or be it in analysis, or even within dissemination, we really think that we use China as that pacing items, and so the investments we make in those areas are specifically designed to be able to allow us to keep our competitive edge over the Chinese.
Thank you. Deputy Director Cohen.
So the good news is what I'm about to say is going to sound a lot like what has already been said, and I think probably similar to what the DNI said yesterday. We have sort of 4 priorities in the agency that Director Burns and I are trying to promote sort of on a daily basis, and also as part of a review that is currently underway. The first is how we are addressing the multifaceted sort of full spectrum threat from China. Knowing that you wanted us to skip past China, I will save my China comments and what we're doing on that.
We'll revisit China.
Absolutely. Okay. The second is technology, and like my colleagues here on the dais, what we are looking at in the agency is technology, I think, from 2 dimensions. One is sort of the threat that emerging and disruptive technologies pose to our interests here in the United States and around the world. We're looking at biotechnology. We're looking at the use of sort of the aggressive use against us of artificial intelligence and machine learning techniques. But we're also looking at technology from the other side of the ledger, which is how we can better make use of emerging technologies to do what we need to do. I mean, much of what fuels the agency and our all source analysis, our collection, and sort of all that we do is technology. And the better that we are able to incorporate new technologies into what we're doing, the better we'll be able to do our job in the community. The third issue is partnerships. And by partnerships, we sort of mean that broadly. We mean our partnerships overseas, how we are working with liaison partners, which are an enormous force multiplier for us around the world, how we're working with the community, both the policy community and the intelligence community in Washington. We are obviously a component of a very powerful intelligence community, much more so the better that we are integrated with our partners. And then the last piece is our partnership with the private sector, which has obviously a technology piece to it, but is broader than that. And thinking about our relationship with the private sector, not purely in a transactional basis, but as a partnership, as an ongoing relationship. And the last piece is people. And I think for all of us, the folks who make up our organizations are clearly our most important resource, and really leaning into our recruitment, our retention, our promotion, ensuring that we have a diverse workforce is absolutely elemental to what we do and how we are able to do our job. So those are the priorities that we're focused on at the agency.
Thank you. General Nakasone.
Olivia, thank you very much. And let me begin by, I think, echoing most of us feeling today it's great to be back at the Gaylord here for this convention, also being able to obviously enjoy the hosting by both FC and INSA. As we take a look at the strategic environment at the agency, I would tell you, beyond what Director Haynes talked yesterday about China, I would say we start thinking and very, very focused on cybersecurity. What has our nation faced over the past 9 months? SolarWinds, Hafnium, JBS, Colonial Pipeline, ransomware, supply chain attacks. Cybersecurity is national security, and we strongly believe that. We also believe that if it's cybersecurity leads to a new strategic environment of competition. Competition in the sense of our adversaries, near-peer adversaries that are looking at being able to operate below the level of armed conflict, to do a number of different activities, to conduct strategic campaigns against our nation in areas such as cybersecurity or influence or other areas that impact our economy. And the last piece I would say on our strategic environment is collaboration. It shouldn't come as any surprise that we're really good collaborators. We work really effectively with all of our partners here. But we live in an environment today that we have to be even more effective outside of even the IC and the interagency, right? How is it, as David talked about, working with the private sector, that we can be different? How is it that we can work with foreign partners to ensure that they get a lot of what they need for their own security? And how do we enhance the partnerships that we have today, whether or not it's with Jen Easterly at CISA or Chris Inglis as the National Cyber Director? These are things that really define our environment today.
Thank you. Dr. Scalise.
Good morning, everybody. So at the NRO, we provide the overhead assets that allow us to look into and listen into denied areas or areas that are difficult to get into. So we're largely a capability provider. So our focus has been on innovation. We talked about China. They're our main driver in that regard, but as we try and look into denied areas, people are doing things to keep us from looking there. So technology is something that we have to focus on and take advantage of, not only the new technologies that are coming out that will allow us to look not only at the traditional things better, but to look for different signatures, different phenomenologies that make it more difficult for an adversary to hide their intent. To accomplish that, we work with partners, traditional and non-traditional. Clearly, we work with industry. They have great ideas and great capabilities. But we have an emerging commercial sector that's allowing us to go off and take advantage of not only products that come out, but also capabilities that come out, actual production spacecraft or production ground systems that we can go off and use that allow us to reduce cost and therefore increase capability in other areas. Increasing our partnerships with other organizations has been mentioned here. We have great partnerships with everybody up here, plus other organizations. U.S. Space Force and U.S. Space Command are absolutely critical as we look to operate in the space domain. It's more congested than it's been, and it's also a much more competitive environment that has the potential for becoming a warfighting environment. And we need to be able to have tactics, techniques, and procedures and capabilities that allow us to protect our assets so we can deliver the information that's needed up here. And people. The NRO was formed and existed for most of its 60 years with JDAs, people from other organizations staffing our organization. Often they stayed there for a career. 5 years ago, we created our own cadre, so that allows us to increase our diversity, bring in new ideas, new capabilities. So that's also been a focus of what we've been doing. And in the end, what we're trying to do is innovate faster so we can deliver the capability that the community needs, both the civil community and the intelligence community and the Department of Defense needs, faster and more efficiently and more effectively.
Thank you very much. That was a very useful overview, perfect encapsulation. We'll revisit a lot of the things that you've raised. But I'd like to start specifically on the topic of counterterrorism, which is an issue from which multiple administrations, including this one, have sought to pivot. Recent events in Afghanistan may have illustrated why that may be difficult, especially because some of the resources that were to be put toward great power competition were presumably coming from of these counterterrorism portfolios. General Berrier, I'd like to start with you, almost alphabetically. You served in Afghanistan, and you're not the only one on this stage who has. The DNI made clear yesterday that Afghanistan isn't currently at the top of the list of terrorism threats. That goes to Yemen, Somalia, Syria, Iraq. But we do know that al-Qaeda is intent on reconstituting in Afghanistan, and that unless they're disrupted, on developing a capability to attack the homeland. What is the current assessment of that timeline, which the Pentagon has said it would revise down from the 2 years it had originally anticipated? And what's your level of confidence right now that without ground-based troops and intelligence capabilities, the U.S. is going to be able to detect and disrupt an attack on the homeland before it happens?
Thanks for the question, and I'll take a stab at it. I know my colleagues here will want to assist me in this. So I would say the current assessment, probably conservatively, is 1 to 2 years for Al Qaeda to build some capability to at least threaten the homeland. That said, DIA is not going to take their eye off the ball of terrorism. We still have the Defense Counterterrorism Center. It is well partnered with all the agencies here that look at counterterrorism analysis. And I would also say that we're thinking about ways how to gain access back into Afghanistan with all kinds of sources and accesses. And so we are prioritizing that effort. We'll continue to prioritize it. But we have to be careful to balance these very scarce resources with this pivot to China and to Russia. So we're all taking a very careful look at that. And for the time being, our defense analysis for counterterrorism will remain what it is.
Right now, do you have the resources you need to do both?
Well, I would never say that we have the resources we need to do both. We could always use more resources, but right now I think we're well balanced to be able to do both for the time being.
Deputy Director Cohen, I'd love your perspective on the timeline. Is that also how the CIA assesses it to look? And can you also offer us insight into how the agency is approaching collection in the region now, absent that robust physical presence that we had and absent the local partners that we were in a position to trust for so long? There have been so many questions raised about how over-the-horizon capabilities are supposed to work without a human network to guide them. So give us some insights there. How's it going to work?
Sure. So look, on the timeline, I am in the same place as Scotty here. I mean, I think what's difficult about the timeline question is what you're measuring, and clearly, if the question is, when will Al Qaeda, or for that matter, ISIS-K, have the capability to strike the homeland? I mean, that is the fundamentally the question that we have been asked, not just to assess from a timeline perspective, but to ensure that we have the capability to provide indication and warning to the policy community of that developing. I think the 1 to 2 year timeline sounds about right. I mean, I think we are already beginning to see some of the indications of some potential movement of Al Qaeda to Afghanistan, but it's early days, and we will obviously keep a very close eye on that. In terms of how we're going to do that, how we will keep this sort of very keen watch on what is happening in Afghanistan, I think, to be sure, our current capability in Afghanistan is not what it was 6 months ago or a year ago. That sort of is inherent in the decision to withdraw troops. It also had an impact on the presence of the agency in Afghanistan. That being said, the problem set that we are facing is not one that is new to the community. We at the agency and with our partners have experience in collecting intelligence in areas that are non-permissive, and doing so without a physical presence on the ground. I mean, many of the places that Director Haynes was talking about yesterday are places where we have developed the techniques and the capabilities and the procedures for the intelligence collection that we need in order to address a potential terrorist threat. So I think we will be using those many of those same techniques in Afghanistan as we work from over the horizon, principally, although I think we will also look for ways to work from within the horizon to the extent that is possible. But we will approach this in the way that we have approached the counterterrorism mission in many places around the world for a number of years, and I think as a community we continue to get better and better at doing that.
Thank you. I know you can't get into a whole lot of it in a setting like this, but is the aim to preserve or rebuild some human network there? Is that involving detasking other assets? Or are you looking at more relying on some of the partners on this stage who have, again, technologies that have assisted in collection before?
We will look to do everything.
Skillfully said.
Deputy Director Abate, I'd like you to address two different parts of the domestic angle here. And I regret having to compress this way, but there are two different elements. First, how is the Bureau managing potential threats from individuals arriving from Afghanistan here who may have been inadequately vetted or flagged for security concerns? And then second, how are you managing threats from extreme right-wing groups, some of whom have associations with the January 6th riot, who've expressed admiration for the Taliban takeover? How are you contending with those two developments right now?
Oh, that's a wide spectrum.
It sure is. I can see.
On the first point, we do utilize, as we apply to anyone coming into the United States, a very thorough screening and vetting process. That is limited, of course, by the information we collect and that can go into the systems in terms of yielding an output and identifying threats. So we're all working together to apply that in the community to prevent anyone who may pose a threat to the United States from coming here in the first instance. If someone was to get through and arrive here, it's the work we do every day across the country through all of our joint terrorism task forces. So if somebody arrives here and we identify them as a threat, we're going to open investigation on them, and then we're going to invest resources in determining if they do pose an actual threat, what that is, and then work to neutralize that individual so they can't cause harm here. On the domestic side...
Before you go there, are you in a position to offer any numbers as to how many individuals are cause for concern right now?
No. We're not going to get into that. No, we don't talk about how many cases we have in terms of terrorism in the Bureau. I think that...
the DHS Secretary has declined to say as much, but of course everybody's interested in what that number may be. Let me let you keep going.
So on the domestic side, again, there's a wide spectrum of ideological motivators there as well. We've seen individuals motivated by racial and ethnic bias commit grievous acts of harm. Anti-government, anti-authority motivated individuals have come to the forefront as well in recent times. Again, it's the work that we do. We're out there every day along with partners represented here and beyond, coming together, collaborating in the task force environment, working to spot those threats up front, and then working against them to keep people safe and prevent harm from happening before it does.
Have you seen any specific credible threats ahead of this Saturday's rally?
So there's a lot of talk online, chatter online. Everyone knows that. There's no secret about that. I would say that we don't have any specific credible threat information about violence that may occur there. But we do collectively in the law enforcement community, DC, it's a public safety imperative every day to protect people and keep people in the city safe. So yes, there is a focus on September 18th, this coming Saturday, based on things we've seen before and lessons learned. And there's a lot of planning and preparation that is going into this, particularly by the frontline agencies that are charged with physical security at the Capitol. And based on that, I believe everyone is well prepared to keep the citizens and the city safe.
In the universe of issues that you're contending with, where do you currently rank domestic violent and extremism?
We look, as I already said, counterterrorism is our #1 priority. It's at the top of our threat rankings from the FBI perspective, and we put international terrorism and domestic terrorism equally at the top. We can't take our eye off of either, or the entire spectrum of individuals that are coming at us that way, because again, it's all about protecting life and keeping people safe, and that's it. That's the bottom line. It's everything that we focus on doing every day, #1.
Thank you, sir. General Nakasone, if I could enlist you on this topic. You have some unique experience in degrading terrorist networks online through the work of Joint Task Force Ares, of course, which was charged with penetrating ISIS networks and taking them offline, and which it did to great effect. You've since said that you would shift its focus, and that of Cyber Command more generally, towards great power competition. In light of the developments in Afghanistan, are you revisiting that realignment? And again, if not, do you have the resources you need to do both?
So Olivia, as we talk about the influence portion of the threat to our nation, I think you're exactly correct that we have a number of different threats out there. You identified one in terms of violent extremist organizations, but it's also nation states as well that conduct influence operations to obviously form schisms in our society or be able to portray a narrative that's much different. In terms of where we're focused, we have shifted Joint Task Force areas to a broader focus on our near-peer competitors in terms of what they are doing. But we haven't taken the ball off of what violent extremist organizations are doing. And in fact, I would tell you, working with the FBI, working with our partners at the agency, this is something that we're very, very familiar with. You asked, do I have everything to do both? I have enough to do both right now. Would I like to have more? Certainly. But we prioritize based upon the resources, just like all of us do here for our agencies.
Let's shift to China, which again, successive administrations have identified as the paramount strategic threat. And I'd like to hear from Dr. Scalise and General Cleveland here. Dr. Scalise, first to you. First, congratulations on NRO's 60th anniversary, which I understand you're celebrating this year. I hope there is cake. You recently described China's drive to erode the United States' intelligence and operational advantage in space as unquenchable. You said that the overall dynamic is a competition, a fight, and if we're not careful, a knockdown, drag-out brawl. Those are some strong words. So if you could please expand on that, what, if any, guardrails are there against an escalation spiral in space? And if you could talk to us a little bit specifically about how you're thinking about anti-satellite capabilities that are being developed by both China and Russia.
Certainly. China clearly wants to be the leader in space. They recognize the advantage that it provides militarily and that it provides diplomatically to show that you're a technological leader. And they want to make sure that they erode our capabilities up there. They've developed systems. You mentioned some of them, ASAT systems, both that can be launched from the ground or implemented from the ground. As well as systems in space that they have that can be used to disarm our satellites or at least hamper the ability for them to operate the way they're supposed to. So our job is to stay technologically ahead and capability ahead in terms of being able to detect those threats and to respond to those threats in ways that will render them ineffective. And we do that a number of ways. I mentioned technology. We're also doing it in terms of our architecture. We have to change our architecture so that it's much more resilient to attack. That involves proliferation of systems. It involves relying on our partners, commercial and international, to go off and do that as well. So that the calculus that has to be there is greater than the number of weapons that they may have that can disable or hinder our operations. We also have to innovate, as I mentioned, so that we can go off and determine intent, or help these people determine intent by collecting things that can no longer be hidden. And then, as you were mentioning, what do we do in space? We're working very closely with the recently elevated U.S. Space Command to develop tactics and procedures so that we can operate in an effective way normally by establishing norms of operation in space so that we all kind of know what it is that we would do and how we would operate when we want to test things or when we're having normal operations in space. And then if you deviate from those, that would be a lot like law of the sea and how we operate there. And also developing tactics for if things get hot, if we do end up into a situation, we all know how to operate, what we're going to protect and how we're going to protect it. And then we're working with Space Force to develop those capabilities as well that we need to understand what's going on. Space situational awareness is one, or space domain awareness in today's terminology, is something we really need to understand what's up there and what's friendly and what's not friendly.
On the norms question, do you have interlocutors internationally that are engaging in this question, or is it just you and Space Command saying we really need to get some rules of the road here?
No, it's broader than that. We have been working with our international partners beyond Five Eyes and through the State Department with the UN to go off and do that. The lead for it has been the U.S. Space Force in articulating those norms. And I believe we're making a lot of progress there in terms of determining what it is that we do.
General Cleveland, can you talk to us about how this looks from, in terms of geospatial capabilities, which is, of course, another field where China is very much seeking to achieve dominance. Last year, NGA announced its moonshot plan to spur innovation, generate new partnerships. Has that had the effect you need it to have in order to keep pace with Beijing and a lot of other foreign competitors who are rushing into this space?
Sure, Olivia, thanks. So we've all talked about that we are in this strategic competition with China. Specific to the GeoInt community and the discipline of GeoInt, we are absolutely in the competition that Dr. Scalise really described. When we look at the capabilities that the Chinese are putting into orbit and we look at what their ultimate goal is, they certainly want to surpass us with the GeoInt capabilities that they have, and I think they recognize the value of it. First, you look at what they're doing from a positioning, navigation, and timing standpoint. They have essentially established a pretty mature, their version of a GPS capability because they realize the value of precision location on the Earth, militarily as well as in everything else that they're doing. They have a very mature national capability, and they're constantly launching more capability across a number of phenomenologies. And then they have a growing commercial industry, and that commercial industry does partner with the government to provide them capability. And so in many ways, they have the ability now to do to us what we have been doing for quite a while. They've got the ability to have very precision timing and targeting. They've got the ability to observe our activities, not just when we are deployed overseas, but certainly in the United States, and they've got the ability to rapidly disseminate that. So our real focus, obviously working very closely with NRO and Director Scalise, our real focus in maintaining that competitive edge is trying to increase our ability to do the things that we do very well, which is, number one, the orchestration and the collection orchestration of these capabilities to make sure that we can rapidly apply collection capability to a required target, then the processing of the information that's coming off, the exploitation of it, and then the dissemination of it. Being able to get this type of information down to the very lowest levels or to the very highest levels to the policymakers who require it. So our real focus is on that collection orchestration aspect, improving our efforts there, as well as the processing, the exploitation or the analysis of it, and then ultimately the dissemination of it.
Thank you. Deputy Director Cohen, on China, I understand that the CIA is still in the process of several internal reviews, one of which is its approach to China. The one thing that Director Burns has already mentioned is the potential forward deployment of China specialists in order to more effectively compete with Beijing. Can you tell us how the agency is doing in finding and clearing the individuals that you need with the cultural, regional, linguistic expertise that you need? And then can you talk to us, this is another big two-part question, but can you talk to us a little bit about how, in an environment of ubiquitous technical surveillance, any new generation of officers is going to be expected to operate?
Sure.
That's a biggie.
So you're exactly right, Olivia. One of the things that we are looking to do as part of the review is to think about how we approach the China issue, not specifically from Beijing Station, but how we approach it globally, because the competition with China, whether it's diplomatic, economic, technological, you name it, is a global competition. And so one of the things that we are going to do is to sort of take a page out of the playbook from the agency from years past and forward deploy in a variety of places around the world analysts, case officers, technologists, sort of the whole suite of capability the agency has in order to address the issue with China, whether it's in Africa or South America or Europe, wherever it may be. To do that, we need more people, and we need people who some of whom obviously would be useful to be Mandarin speakers. Others, it's useful just to have the training in order to do this job. We are, obviously, as part of this, looking to how we can bring on board more quickly the folks that we need to do that. But we are mindful of the fact that, and we know this to be true, that not just the Chinese, but the Chinese, try to run people at us, right? It's and part of our job in bringing people on board is to ferret out folks who are not there for good and patriotic reasons, and there's no magic to this. This requires hard work. It requires some deep background investigations. We are leveraging technology to do this as well, but it's something that we need to do if we're going to achieve what we need to do, which is to have a increased focus on China globally. On the question of ubiquitous technical surveillance and backstories, look, that is not a China-specific problem. That is a problem that we confront and our colleagues confront in many places around the world, and it is kids today. Everybody has a digital backstory, and being able to operate in environments where folks with digital backstories are being surveilled by very capable adversaries who are matching up what they're seeing with what is available is a enormous challenge to how we do our work. But the answer to that is not to pretend we can roll back the clock 30 years to where we could do sort of false stocks on paper and everything would go fine. We are frankly embracing the digital domain and these digital backstories and the ability to operate in environments where there is this surveillance and to do so surreptitiously. And I will leave it at that.
Okay. General Berrier, let me ask you, you've spoken previously about how Beijing has accelerated its military modernization efforts across domains. Mm-hmm. One thing that it has really intensified is the expansion of its nuclear arsenal. What can you tell us about China's nuclear strategy? Has it changed? And if the objective isn't minimum deterrence, what is it?
So we are observing changes in the way they're thinking about this. And as I look at China broadly, I tend to think of it as a three-stranded cable, right? It's Xi's political strategy, which has been able to really discipline the party and discipline his military leaders. The Belt Road Initiative has financed all of this very, very ably across the globe. And then this military strategy of modernization. That three-stranded cable is wrapped in this sheath of acquisition of information and technology and the greatest theft of intellectual property that we've seen in the history of mankind, frankly. They're modernizing their conventional military. They are modernizing their nuclear capability. And when we talk about existential threats, the nuclear triad that the Russians have, it's credible and it's effective. And I think the Chinese see that nuclear triad as a goal that they would like to have. And so we are going to watch that very, very carefully. And as they build over time, we'll stay in contact with our partners here on the stage here, but also with our partners at Stratcom who watch this very, very carefully. So we have an eye on that and we're watching it.
Let me introduce an audience question, which I'm going to sort of lob as a jump ball. We continue to say China is the pacing threat, but we continue to be mired in red tape to modernize our collection posture, address cyber threats, and adopt advanced technologies. What are your agencies doing to speed up change so we can compete? Anyone?
Well, I guess I'll take that one, at least part of it. That's a challenge that we have to do, and I look at the banner here for Intelligence and National Security Summit, New Decade, New Challenges. I would like to add new opportunities because I do believe that we do have a lot of opportunities. We have a lot of new technologies that are coming out. We have a lot of new partnerships that are coming out, and we, at least at the NRO, and I know my colleagues here as well, are looking at different mechanisms. We're looking at different contractual mechanisms. Clearly, when we're buying a service, it's different than going off and buying a satellite. So we have to have ways of doing that quicker and more efficiently. The same is true when we're buying satellites. I mentioned earlier that we're looking at it and saying, well, we don't need to develop this anymore because there's a production line of satellites that we can go off and use. That greatly reduces the timeline to deliver a capability on orbit. It also allows us to focus resources on the new phenomenologies that we need so that people can't hide, organizations can't hide. So we're looking at a number of different techniques. And then people play an absolutely incredible role in this as they have new ideas, and we're working to keep our organization flat so that those ideas can bubble up relatively quickly and that we can move fast when we see a new idea and test it so that we can get it on orbit quickly, or we can develop the tool if it's a software tool that will help interpret the data. So we're working across all of those lines to break down the barriers that limit us in our procurement and adoption of technologies.
I think all of us will probably be a bit guarded in terms of how much we're going to say here, just given the scope of the question. But one of the things I would offer is, so for our agency that is truly an agency of data and loves data and accumulates a tremendous amount of data, primarily for our cryptographic issues in terms of being able to break code. We look at it a bit differently now. How can we take a look at our very, very high performance computers and solve some very difficult challenges that might be analytic in different ways that we hadn't thought about before? And I think that for us has been really a game changer in terms of our thinking and the way that we start to look at a new decade and certainly new opportunities as well.
Go ahead.
Can I just say, so I have a sort of an unusual perspective on the intelligence community, having been in this job for 2 years, from 2015 to 17, and then spending 4 years in the wilderness and coming back. And one of the things that I am struck by, and just picking up on what my colleagues just said, is the innovative technological spirit that I think permeates our organizations. And so I would challenge the premise of the question from the audience, which is sort of a downbeat, like everything sucks kind of question, right? It doesn't. Like there really is remarkably innovative, creative work that's being done in all of our agencies. Some of it is obviously things that are closely guarded, but many of the like much of what we need to do as we sort of look over the horizon, as I said earlier, is going to be technologically driven. And I whether it's dealing with the issue of ubiquitous technical surveillance or how we get into denied areas in order to do geo-int or SIGINT or human for that matter. And there is great work being done. And yeah, it's bureaucratic and there's red tape and all the rest, but I don't think it is stopping this community from doing what it needs to do.
Sure, I'd be happy to pile on. To your question, really, of how do we accelerate our technological progress in the direction we're going, I certainly agree with everything there, but I think sometimes there can be a difference in expectations about what the private industry can do and what the government can do. And there's always this mantra, gosh, if we could only move as fast as the speed of business, and if we could only be able to work like business. And I think in some instances, there are equities and oversight that business has to deal with and that the government has to deal with. And so as we move forward, we think the way to really accelerate this is to further solidify our partnership with industry and with a variety of partners. And I think first off, there's a step in it where you have to cross a mental threshold that says our partners in industry are as important as our other partners across the spectrum, be it within government or be it with allies. And then I think once you cross that threshold, there is the ability to then determine what does industry do very well, what does government do very well. Industry obviously moves at speed, assumes a lot of risk. Government, of course, provides requirements and standards and security and all of that. And so we'll look for ways to partner. And so we are trying to develop more instruments, be it research relationships, be it you mentioned earlier Moonshot. We've created something we refer to as Moonshot Labs out in St. Louis, where it's an opportunity to have really a private-public partnership where it's NGA space, and then private companies are able to come in and help us develop software. As we look to our facility that is being built in St. Louis right now, N2W, we intend to keep about 40% of that facility unclassified so that we can foster these types of partnerships and these types of relationships, and again, take the best of industry and combine it with the best of government with that.
Can I pile on?
Okay, yes, quickly.
Okay, very, very quickly. So I talked a little bit about the reorganization that we did at DIA, which is really, really substantial, and that was really to get after posturing the agency for strategic competition. As we did that, I asked questions like, where can DI lead? Where should we be leading for the Department of Defense? How do we do that? One of my very great seniors in a meeting with just SESs and GOs in the room said, sir, you don't understand. This enterprise, this intelligence enterprise, it does not want to be led. It only wants to exist. And so for me right now, it's about changing culture. And so we are moving it. We're moving it slowly. We're looking for some quick wins in the area of arena of strategic competition, but I do believe it's also a cultural issue, and I agree with everything that's been said here, but leadership has to take hold here, and we have to be able to lead.
Fulsome set of answers to an audience question. So let me move us on a little bit to a discussion of gray zone measures and introduce Russia, which has acted in obviously consistently, if not increasingly brazen ways across a number of domains. And General Nakasone, I'd like to start with you. At this event last year, you said that foreign influence operations would be the next great disruptor, and that they would affect not only our democratic processes, but diplomatic processes, war fighting, et cetera. We've already heard of Russian activity targeting the 2022 elections, and we've seen these broader efforts by China to exploit the narrative surrounding COVID-19. So can you update us on your thinking about this? If influence operations are still a defining challenge, how are they changing? How is NSA Cyber Command adapting to confront them and to blunt their effect, including on, if not especially, elections?
Yeah, we began with a focus on elections in 2018 and then certainly 2020. What's changed with influence with regards to elections? Well, first of all, there's more than just one adversary. It began with just the Russians. Now it's the Russians, it's the Chinese, it's the Iranians. It's a number of different actors. The second thing that's changed is we truly believe that outside of our agency and command, our partnerships are what is going to be effective at the end of the day. Working with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, working with CISA, working with academic and industry partners in 2020, we had a significant impact on adversaries that wanted to impact our election. You may recall the Tuesday before the election, the Director of National Intelligence and the Director of FBI talking about threats from Iran publicly. This is the type of work that we're going to be doing, I think, for quite some time in the election sphere. But it's not just elections, to your point. Let's take the vaccine. Let's take COVID-19. Let's take a look at what adversaries have been doing to try to impact or influence a narrative that is perhaps going against, the impact of what our vaccinations or our vaccine might be able to do in terms of being able to impact this global pandemic. We're seeing the Chinese in that realm. We're seeing the Chinese against a number of our allies like the Australians to try to influence public opinion within Australia or in the, the Southwest Pacific region. This is where we live today, and this is, I think, for our adversaries' perspective, cheap, easy, and effective many times for what they're doing in the influence realm.
So are we better at blunting it, I guess is the question. And if you want to take the 2022 midterms as an example, I would welcome your insights into what's going on there and how we're preparing to confront it.
So I would say, are we better at it? Yes, I think we're better at it. I think we're better at it not only in elections, but we're also better at recognizing in other different spheres when it comes up. Hey, when one of our partners that we see as being targeted by a near-peer adversary, being able to work with them through our agencies to provide that information. In terms of 2022, our focus right now is obviously the focus of being able to generate the insights of what adversaries are doing and who might be doing that. It will move very, very quickly to being able to share that information with a broad range of partners. And the last piece to your part is, when do we impose costs in the future in terms of how do we ensure adversaries don't have that capability in 2022 to have an impact?
How would you impose costs?
Well, a number of different ways. I mean, over the past several years, you've seen us release a number of cybersecurity advisories. 1 year ago, we released Darovarub with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. You say, what's Darovarub? Well, Darovarub was the Swiss Army knife of malware that the GRU was using. Being able to release that publicly with our friends at the Bureau, that's like an inoculation across the entire IT community when private sector is able to take that information and then develop the antivirus capabilities. That's a really good example.
As are offensive capabilities if they become necessary.
A number of different capabilities, certainly.
You mentioned other actors. Are we seeing other actors specifically targeting 2022?
I think that what we're seeing right now is, again, a bit of proxies that are very interested perhaps in moving forward. I think that the cast of characters is still to be developed, and so we're still watching that very carefully, Olivia.
Okay. Deputy Director Abate, after what appeared to be a small summer lull, the threat of ransomware appears to be very much alive and growing more sophisticated by the incident. So many of these groups have links to the Russian government. Have you had any indication that Moscow has started cracking down on groups operating on their soil? And have you had any indication that Moscow has committed to not target critical infrastructure here in the U.S.?
Based on what we've seen, I would say there is no indication that the Russian government has taken action to crack down on ransomware actors that are operating in the permissive environment that they've created there. We've asked for help and cooperation with those who we know are in Russia, who we have indictments against, and we've seen no action. So I would say that nothing's changed in that regard.
Despite, obviously, the president's personal appeal to Vladimir Putin in order to do that. So what recourse are we considering? And maybe General Nakasone, I mean, U.S. officials have said that if the Russian government doesn't step in and take action, we will. So have we gotten to that point?
So, I think that, as the president determines a way forward, we will provide a number of different options that are available, and that's across all of our agencies and certainly U.S. Cyber Command. And that's obviously for the president to decide to move forward, but those options certainly will be provided for his consideration.
Okay. Mr. Abate, let me just circle back to you because some of these groups have begun starting to tell victims that their data will be leaked if they involve ransomware negotiators or law enforcement agencies like the FBI. So what are you doing to address those kinds of added disincentives to victim reporting, which I know you work very hard to bolster?
We're out constantly building relationships with private sector partners, working to educate, creating a trusted relationship where we can have a two-way sharing of information. That it's essential, much like the relationships we share here and the intelligence information sharing that we've significantly elevated across all the threats. We remain incredibly focused on that within cyber, and really because of the distant and anonymized nature of that threat, it requires an even elevated collaboration within it, and it extends out beyond government, as I noted, to the private sector, academia, and others who are targeted by this. So we're working hard at that. We have cyber task forces in each of our 56 field offices. Now we have national programs which are focused on outreach to private sector. And the bottom line is no one of our agencies or anyone can do this alone. We've got to come together in order to continue to work to tackle this problem.
I want to just ask you because the FBI obviously has a policy of saying don't pay ransom, that you discourage it, but it's not illegal. Ann Neuberger, the Deputy National Security Advisor for Emerging Cyber and Tech, has said that that's because there's a level of resiliency we haven't achieved yet within industry because you would be punishing victims twice. What level of resiliency would you need to see before you would start considering making ransomware payments illegal?
Look, we're not from the FBI standpoint, it's not our place to determine or set policy with regard to whether or not ransomware payments should or should not be made. It's a really tough question, though. You're right. And it's easy for us in government to say don't pay for a variety of good reasons because it encourages more, bad criminal behavior. It permits further funding and furtherance of the criminal activities of the groups and the individuals involved. But though we certainly don't encourage the payment of ransom, we also understand that it's a business decision ultimately for those that are affected or impacted or under attack in the private sector. And I think we do need to be more open-minded in that regard. It goes back to building those trusted relationships, and I think we have progressed in that as well, working with the victims, the companies that have been attacked, bringing more information and intelligence regarding who hit them, how that occurred, working together to inform the decisions that they're making, primarily based on economic consideration as to whether to make that payment or not. So it's a very complicated and tough question. And though we continue to discourage the payment of ransom, again, I think we've progressed in terms of having the conversation when an attack occurs with the victim to help guide their decision toward making that.
I'm watching the clock, so I want to ask Deputy Director Cohen, still in this discussion of gray zone engagement, I want to ask you about the troubling phenomenon of anomalous health incidents, also known as Havana syndrome. It's affected 200 American officers since 2016 worldwide, 100 of which are intelligence officers. I understand the analytic line from the intelligence community is that it's not yet known whether a foreign actor is behind this, but I also know it's a huge priority for the agency, it's a huge priority for the director. You've reinvigorated the task force that you have dedicated to this issue. So has that borne any fruit? Have you gotten any closer to understanding what or who is behind these incidents?
So I think there's no higher obligation that we have as leaders than to protect the people who work for us. And as these incidents continue to occur, the focus that we have in the agency from the director and from myself and from the group of really extraordinary officers that we have brought together to lead our effort to try to identify who may be behind this and what the mechanism may be, sort of the attribution piece, is something that we are frankly focused on every day and applying an enormous amount of focus and resources on. At the same time, ensuring that we are providing the care that officers need when they are affected. In terms of whether we have gotten closer, I think the answer is yes, but not close enough in order to make the sort of analytic judgment that I think people are waiting for. But this is a classic intelligence problem, and we are approaching it with the same techniques, the same approach of targeters, collectors, analysts, technologists, looking at this issue to try and identify the attribution, the whodunit part of this. We'll get there. I can't tell you whether it's going to be tomorrow or next week or 6 months from now, but this is a serious issue. It's real. It's affecting our officers. It's affecting others around the community and in government, and we're going to figure it out.
Did the incident involving the vice president, was that instructive? Did that indicate to you that there's no sort of level official that is out of bounds here? I know it didn't directly involve the vice
I was just
president,
gonna
but it
say,
derailed,
it was-
but of
yeah.
course it temporarily
Yeah.
delayed a trip of hers because she was made aware of incidents where she was traveling.
Look, I think every incident, every piece of intelligence that we collect on this helps to build out the picture. So sure, it was part of the mosaic of intelligence that we're taking in to try to understand, what the mechanism is, who the actor is, what the techniques and tactics are that are being used. So absolutely.
We have under 10 minutes left, and just still a lot of questions to ask, but I did want to reserve some time for just a quick set of reflections from each of you on the women and men who work or who want to work with you and who are likewise being challenged in these unprecedented ways in their efforts to safeguard the nation. General Nakasone, I've heard you say that it's not all about the money going toward industry, but it's also not all about the mission. So maybe each of you can just quickly tell us how you're thinking creatively about attracting, developing, refreshing the talent that you need for these expanding mission sets that you have.
So I'll give you two ways. First of all is a bit of a mindset. When I came in the Army, I didn't think much about leaving the Army, right? I came in for a career and I thought I'd spend 20 years and then do something else. What we realize now is that, the great initiative for people to come work for us may only be for a short period of time. And so our culture has to change with that, the idea of bringing someone rapidly, making a difference, and then they leave. But here's the big part. How do they come back to us when they go to the wilderness and then want to come back to our agency and make it really effective? Here's the second part, and you've been there. Cyberspace Collaboration Center at the National Security Agency. I'll share a quick story. First 2 weeks in the job, someone came to see me and they said, "Hey, Paul, look outside your window. The most difficult challenge you're going to have is that fence line there and bringing new ideas inside the fence line." Okay, so let's eliminate the fence line. Let's have an unclassified center where we do cybersecurity, where we're engaging with the private sector, we're engaging with our industry partners, we're engaging with academicians that can come and have that discussion, or can have it virtually. That's a bit of a different way that we have thought about it and we're approaching this new workforce.
I did want to save the time so that everybody could address this question of talent, because I know it is so important. Nobody wants to.
Sure.
We can go to hard questions if you want.
Olivia, I'll jump in as well. Obviously we've all talked about the value of our people, and I really genuinely just remain amazed every time you talk to young officers at their capabilities, their skills, and their commitment. At the end of the day, many of them do come in because they want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. They want to contribute to a larger effort, and you see that across everywhere. When we look at how do we recruit talent, quite honestly, the reason why Vice Admiral Sharp is not here today and you're kind of stuck with the junior varsity is he is out in St. Louis today, and he is participating in a forum led by St. Louis University as well as Harris Stowe State University, where they are talking about geospatial intelligence, and they're trying to recruit young people. We maintain a number of relationships with a number of other academic institutions as well, and then we try and capitalize on that by bringing these young people into our agency for internships. And I think again about my own time in college doing internships, and frankly they didn't amount to much. And I look at what these young officers are doing, their ability to contribute, it's stunning. And so we're able to bring in a lot of our officers via that path. And so we want to try and start as early as we possibly can to do that. And I'll save time for others.
I'll jump in real quick here, and just so I agree. I mean, part of the problem is we're all competing for the same people. But we're all in one big happy family. But the other thing that we are doing along these lines is accelerating the hiring process. The number of days between when somebody applies for a job at the agency through the clearance process until they get a conditional offer of employment is way too long. And that has impacts on our ability to sort of recruit the people that we're trying to recruit. It has impacts on our ability to recruit a diverse workforce. If people have to wait a year and a half, 2 years between when they apply to when they are offered the job, people cannot wait that long. And so one of the things that we are that we are doing as part of our part of this initiative that I was talking about earlier is shrinking that timeline and frankly using technology as a way to sort of identify people who are not going to make through the process and get them out quickly, and so we can focus our resources on the ones who we think have a chance to make it. And a variety of different things so that we can shorten that timeline to bring on at the outset the folks that we need to recruit.
Olivia, I'll pile on a little bit here. I think it's a matter of recruiting the right talent, and I think DIA is doing a great job at that. We're not so great at retaining that talent at the 12, 13, 14 level in terms of diversity that's leaving the agency. So we have to focus on that. We're doing a barrier analysis right now to really find out what those answers are, and we hope to gain some insights in there. But I also think it's about how you onboard people, challenging them early, making sure that they get the right mentors early. And we have an informal saying in DIA, it's about seeds to trees, but the tree gets a vote. And so we want to make sure that we're growing global officers at the same time growing those subject matter experts. How long does it take to train a China expert? Probably takes 5 to 7 years. And so we want to make sure that in that 5 to 7 years, we're giving growth, developmental, educational opportunities to make sure that we get that officer at the GS-12, at the GS-13 level that's invested in the agency, wants to be there, and will eventually grow to be a 15 and a senior someday. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll jump in as well. Agree with everything that we've heard, and I think providing an exciting opportunities for folks. And at NRO we have, we're fortunate because we have launches, and people see those, and that provides excitement. In the last year we had, more launches we believe than we've had in our career, and certainly launched over our 60 years of the NRO, and launched many satellites because of the great people that are there. And we did it not only from the normal launch sites. We launched from New Zealand, we launched from Wallops Island, as well as from the Cape Canaveral and Vandenberg. And we've seen it with our internships. Now that we have internships, people are coming because they're saying, you're doing really cool stuff, we want to be part of it. They may not know exactly what it is, because they see the rocket launch, but we never tell them what it was. But they want to know what it was. And we've been able to retain our workforce because we have exciting work, and we're doing new things all the time. And we're attracting a greater workforce, and I think all of us are, because we have opportunities to show that we're doing some really exciting, cutting-edge things.
Can I jump in here?
It is, you will have the last words.
I think everything that's been said is absolutely true. We've got to break down barriers for people coming in, reduce the speed, get people back quickly, let them come in and out. But I think there's a cultural mindset piece to this as well, which is we're all fortunate because our agencies and departments have a common mission that drives everyone within our agencies, and it's all about doing good. And we all offer exciting work, and I think we have strong brands that naturally attracts people to our agencies. And for the Bureau, we've been fortunate because we've seen applications increasing over the last few years, but I still think we have to work hard on it. I would say for the FBI, I've often seen historically this idea that because we have a strong brand, because we have this mission that drives everyone, we don't have to work at it, and people will naturally come to us because of who we are and what our agencies represent. But we have to get out there on the ground, in the communities, in the places, to get the very best talent and to get diversity within that. And we don't commit ourselves to doing that, we're going to fail. So for us, like everyone else represented here, we do get out there. We have community outreach and recruiting events, and we're looking at different ways to approach that all the time, particularly with the changing workplace and the workforce that we see, this year and last year. And we've got to stay committed to that and stay focused on that in order to stay ahead.
I think that's a great note to end on, and either way, we have to end because the clock has run out. Thank you so much to this powerhouse of panelists, to the audience for your excellent questions, which generated so much discussion, and to INSA for having us all here today. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
So, Paul, Scotty, Charlie, David, Paul, and Chris, thank you so much. This panel was really highly anticipated, and you did not fail to deliver. Olivia, masterful moderation. Thank you so much. Those follow-up questions were quite good. Not letting our panelists answer the question they wanted to answer as opposed to answering the question you asked. So well done. Well done to all of you. Thank you so much. One short announcement. As I've been walking around, I noticed a number of shall I say, somewhat more youthful faces in the audience today. So there might be some talent that is looking to come into the community. But I'd like to really encourage all of our young professionals and those who are mentoring young professionals to stop by the Belvedere Lobby Bar at the conclusion of today's program for a happy hour supported by INSS's Intelligence Champions Council and AFCEA's emerging professionals in the intelligence community. It's really a terrific opportunity to learn more about all of the organizations and how you can get involved. We're now going to take a 30-minute break, so please go keep the exhibitors on their toes. And then remember, breakout sessions start promptly at 10:45. Thank you.
Hush not, child, and don't cry. Your folks might understand you by and by. Just move on up toward your destination. Though you may find from time to time complications. Bite your lip and take the trip. Though there may be wet road ahead and you cannot slip, just move on up. For peace you'll find into the steeple of beautiful people where there's only one kind. So hush not, child, and don't cry. Your folks might understand you by and by. Move on up and keep on wishing. Remember your dreams.